Hello, BookTube. Recently, Christopher Russell, our little corner of BookTube's resident cartoon hedgehog, emerged from his mosquito netting to do a video, I'll leave a link to it down below, on 5 bookish hot takes. And I thought it was fascinating. I can reprise them, although you should watch his video to get the full Christopher Russellian effect. His first hot take was that biographies are underappreciated as enjoyment reading material. Absolutely true. Of course, it's my favorite kind of reading. I've championed them for almost a decade on this platform. No matter what level of interest, no matter where you think you are with biographies, I could recommend biographies to you that you would really enjoy. You would end up enjoying them more than you enjoy the made-up stories. Almost certainly. But that was the first one. And then his second hot take was that it's perfectly okay to DNF a book, to do not finish a book, to put a book down if it is not pleasing you. He added a note that was interesting, and that's not common on his channel. So he added a note where he said that you should be sure. Basically, you should be sure. It's perfectly okay to DNF a book, but some books are going to make you want to DNF them even though they're not doing anything wrong. In fact, they're doing something right. Learning is awkward and uncomfortable. Being unsettled by a book that is trying intentionally to unsettle you, but for good, productive reasons, that is probably going to produce a momentary impulse for you to DNF. So you should be perfectly free to DNF a book, but you should be careful about it. Then his third one was that it should be perfectly okay for you to talk about what you're reading. And I can't help but think that this is, I agree, of course, but I can't help but think this is a tiny bit of bookworm defensiveness because, again, I don't want to be a Debbie Downer here, but nobody reads for pleasure. Nobody does. Now, you have surrounded yourself with bookish friends, probably, or you've tried to, and you have us. You have BookTube, and we have you. And that can make a skewed impression of the world. Go out into the world. Nobody reads for pleasure. And as I pointed out on this channel many, many times, the number of dedicated readers in the world in any given year is lower than the number of humans on Earth who die from natural causes. Meaning, statistically speaking, literally nobody in the world reads. We are less than a rounding error. So, of course, I want to stress this too. That it's perfectly okay for you to talk about what you're reading. Just expect blank stares from other people, unless you cultivate your audience well. And then his fourth bookish hot take was that he doesn't really care about what we would call style. That doesn't really concern him. It's mainly a question of the organic properties of the book itself. And then the fifth one, his fifth hot take was that he doesn't care about signed editions. And he starts off his hot take video by defining what a hot take is. And I think it's fair to say that by his own definition, most of his own entries don't count. Or maybe it's that I have a different definition, because his video is fascinating anyway. But to me, hot take implies not just that it's an opinion that might be controversial, but that it's an opinion that certainly will be controversial. In popular online parlance, it also means that you haven't given it any thought. Of course, that won't happen on BookTube. That part of it won't happen on BookTube. But the other part of it, that should be a little bit more controversial than I don't care about signed editions. I would think, but maybe not. So I want to give you a list of my own, of 5 hot takes of my own. I'll try to make mine just a tiny bit hotter than Christopher's were. He is currently living in a very hot country. Maybe he doesn't want his hot takes to be very hot. But I want to start off mine by echoing one of his, which is that it is perfectly okay for you to drop a book that is not entertaining you. The whole point of reading when you are out of school, the whole point of non-professional reading is for you to enjoy yourself. If you're reading a book that has set out the table and promised you that it will entertain you, and then it fails to do so for a long time, you should feel free to drop it. Now, a lot of you are going to have a problem with that. A lot of you have this weird Protestant work ethic thing where you simply will not stop reading a book that you have started. And that can be harmful for all the reasons that Christopher mentions in his own video. That makes reading, not just that book, but reading in general, feel more and more like a chore. I understand where it comes from, Almost all of the people who are listening to me right now learned reading as a chore. Almost all, when you think about it, almost everyone listening to me right now learned reading as a school activity. And it just progressed year after year after year, all the way into adulthood. So that in high school, you were told you have to read this book. Even graduate school, in college. Well, you got to get your reading done. That can have a long, long shadow. And that might be the reason why so many people find it hard to just drop a book. Because on some level, even though they've told themselves, they've long since talked themselves out of it, it still feels like an assignment of some kind. It isn't. It isn't. And you are visibly older today than you were yesterday. You have, in about 10 minutes, you're going to be dead. So you don't have any reading time to waste on a chore, for God's sake. No. As long as mentioned, you are sure, you must be sure that you are dropping the book after having given it a fair, open-minded shot. You must be sure of that. Once you are sure of that, and you must also be sure, as I've mentioned before, that you are not just getting off on the dopamine high of dropping a book, which can happen. You should give the book time, but keep your wits about you, because don't give it too much time. Don't let it outwear its welcome. So that's my hot take number one, is to echo one of Christopher's, which is that there should be no guilt attached to DNFing a book. Hot take number two is that the mainstream genre of science fiction and fantasy, what we can generally loop as SFF, is dead. The mainstream genre of science fiction and fantasy, in other words, of standalone novels that are written for a general audience to pick it up and say, I'm in the mood for some science fiction today, not a dedicated diehard audience of people who know the name of the author's second cat, who's been dead for 20 years, and who are following a particular series to the exclusion of their family, their friends, and their personal hygiene. Not those people. Not those readers. Not Dungeon Crawler Carl. Not that. I'm talking about someone has written a new novel that is science fiction, and you pick it up to read it. Which I'm now realizing in the 21st century, that very description might strike some of you as being just pure fantasy. Who does that? Of course you have to know the author's PIN number for the ATM in order to read their book. Of course you do. Of course you have to stalk them at conventions and be in every Discord server that even mentions their name. No. I'm talking about Ringworld by Larry Niven. I'm talking about Dune by Frank Herbert. I'm talking about a science fiction novel that comes to the bookstore and you pick it up and read it without being part of an unbelievably specified and calcified in-group. I'm not saying that that kind of science fiction and fantasy doesn't still have a foothold in the mainstream publishing industry, but the rest of it is dead. It's gone. There isn't any. Indie publishers do a little to take up the slack. Indie authors certainly are indefatigable in putting out new stuff, and not all of it is book 15 in the Light Shear series or whatever. Not all of it is, hey, my last 6 books were bad. They were just me showing up and doing a word count. But on page 300 of this 1,000-page book that I'm coming up with next, there's an in-joke that all 15 of you are going to love. No, none of that. There are indie authors who still do it right, but there are almost no mainstream authors that do. And for that, I blame 2 things. Since if I'm going to decide that there's been a murder, I have to identify the murderers. I want to blame 2 things. One, as I've already hinted, is fandom. Science fiction and fantasy fandom has not only killed the mainstream standalone success of the genre, but has willfully done it. They like the alternative. They like the result. That I like the in-group feeling of knowing every last detail of whether or not the author of this 25-book series clips his toenails by rounding them or by squaring them off. I like knowing that, and I need to know that in order to read his books. So that's one of the culprits, is fandom itself. This couldn't happen without fandom being embedded to it. And the other culprit, it's going to feel like shooting fish in a barrel, but I believe that it is true, and I believe that its full extent is not only seismic, but underappreciated, and that is romantasy. The recent genre-blending abomination known as romantasy, where the thousands and thousands and thousands and thousands of brainless fans on Book Talk and at conventions are simply yelling the word trope over and over and over again. They're misusing it. In a literary criticism term, in terms of literary criticism, they're misusing it, but it doesn't matter. What they mean is gimmick. I have a list of 10 gimmicks. I have ranked my gimmicks in order of my own preference for them, and I want those gimmicks in my book. And I don't even care if the characters have names. I just want my tropes. Tropes, 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 tropes. So I guess you could say that my two culprits are one and the same, which is the fans, the readership. But maybe not. It could just be that the publishing industry for SFF, mainstream SFF, and also the mainstream SFF authors are all just going where the meager money is. That it could easily be. I don't know. One way or another, all I know is that the genre itself, the mainstream genre itself, is dead. Which is pretty stark, considering how much I have loved it for the last few decades. So that's my hot take number 2. My hot take number 3 is that you should beat up your print and paper books. You should beat them up. And this is a hot take in the sense that you are now spitting your gazpacho at the screen, but nevertheless, it's true. And I have a case to make. I won't make it for long, but when you get a print and paper book, a mass market paperback, a bigger paperback, a hardcover, you should beat the crap out of it. Sit on it, throw it around, dog-ear the pages, underline in pencil, annotate in the margins in pencil, stick stuff inside it, read it over messy meals, take it wherever you want, bang it wherever you want, cuff it and scuff it wherever you want. You should do that. Invest yourself in these things, in these print and paper books. Of course, you can't do that with your ebooks because they're virtual things, and because it would be irresponsible for you to beat and scuff an expensive piece of technology. You can certainly throw around your Kindle. Sorry, this is just sitting on my chest because whenever I make a video like this, I always think I'm going to need to refer to notes, and I never actually do. But that's my case. Now, I could take this case one step further. I won't, because some of you are already apoplectic with the mention of dog-earing. So I won't take it one step further and say you should also do this to library books. But I said I wouldn't do that. Calm yourself. But I want to make my case as to why. And the why is historical, believe it or not, because none of this is as important as we make it out. And you know what illustrates that for me, that has really hammered that home for me, that a lot of you have not seen? The dumpster at the back of the Brattle sale lot here in Boston. The Brattle bookstore has an outdoor sale lot where the books are $1, $5, and $3. I know that's coming as a bit of a sore spot to some of you because I haven't been there in a while, but at the back of the lot, against the back wall of the next building, there's a dumpster. And the books start out at $5. And the staff keeps pretty close watch on them and rotates them out. It gives the staff something to do. They go out there in the lot in all weathers, gradually, slowly rotate them out. If you're not doing well at $5, you will get a chance to do well at $3. And then at $1. And then you get thrown in the dumpster. And the Brattle isn't the only used bookstore that does that, nor the only charity that does that. There are plenty of charities that do that. And plenty of libraries as well, and that horrifies me. Of course, I always pray when I go to the Brattle that I'm not there on a day when I can hear books being chunked into the dumpster. But the thing that it underscores for me is that none of this is as important as we think it is. These books are here and then gone. Your lovingly curated collection up on your walls is going to be junk to somebody else the minute your heart stops pumping blood to your brain. The minute that happens. This is all junk. None of it means anything to me. Probably the person who will be looking at it is not a reader. But even if they are, they won't be you. They won't want all these things. They will go to the nearest charity shop. They will call the Brattle bookshop to send a van out. Whatever it is. These things are really a phenomenon of you. We don't like to believe that, but it is true. They are really a phenomenon of you. So perfectly okay if you want to keep like a shelf anteroom where you keep books that you think you might want to trade in at the local bookstore for credit or sell online or to a used bookstore. Perfectly okay if you want to keep a collection like that. But the books that you're sure you want to keep, beat the crap out of them. That's what I say. Beat the crap out of them. And the reason I mentioned that it's historical is because think of the manuscripts that we have. from 400 years ago, 1,000 years ago, 800 years ago. Think of the Angevin manuscripts that we have, carefully, laboriously copied out by Jason Harrigan and his fellow monks in monasteries all over Northern Ireland and Western Ireland. And every once in a while, when they're copying out a text, they would make a note in the margin. They would blot something accidentally and write a curse word in their native Welsh or whatever. Or they would make a notation in the margin saying, the very devil is in this ink bottle. I can't get the ink to work right. Or they would leave a little notation at the bottom because the text that they're mentioning about, Pearl or Wayfarer or whatever mentions that it was a cold day, and someone will mention in the bottom Latin for "you said it," meaning I am copying this manuscript and I am freezing cold while I do it. The literary traditions that I'm talking about from 1,000 years are, of course, precious. They're, of course, precious. The texts themselves are precious. But I know of almost no one in the antiquarian world of those texts themselves that wouldn't consider those ad hoc little annotations to be just as precious. Those little marks that some human being actually held this book before you. If you had a choice between a manuscript, let's say a bound book from the 18th century that was in perfect condition, just pristine condition, or you had a choice between that and a book with annotations, thoughtful annotations, marks that someone was there and used it, even little detritus from their meals, which one would interest you more? Of course it would be the one that showed its human footprint. That's why I'm saying you should beat the crap out of your books. Not that you should go out of your way to do it, but that you don't have to worry about keeping them pristine, because you're going to be gone in 2 seconds, and a second after you're gone, they're going to be gone. I'm not saying that all of them will make that slow death march all the way back to the Brattles dumpster, but most of them will. I have seen that happen, and I have seen it happen with the book collections of people I knew. I've seen it happen with book collections that I once saw on their shelves, in their living glory, in the place where they were meant to be, in the library of a person, a friend, who was lovingly picking at them and lovingly annotating them and lovingly deciding which goes where and what and how to protect them from sun or mite or dust or whatever. That person goes into the hospital for a 6-month stretch. They don't come out alive. And then, a month, 2 months later, I go to the sale lot and there are their books. Not the same titles, but the exact books. I know the annotations. I know the marginalia. Every once in a while, I will buy one of those books to keep it. If I can find one that I'm interested in, I will buy one just so they don't all end up in the dumpster. But I have watched the slow progression of them going to the dumpster, of friends. Books where I actually knew them when they were on the shelf. There was no chance ever that they were going to go to some magically receptive second reader. And there's no chance for yours either. So you might as well make your peace with that. There would be, I would say, hypothetically, a chance that a lot of my books would be of interest to, for instance, David Murphy, since we have a lot of tastes in common. But considering how much older he is than I am, what are the chances that I'm going to predecease him? No, they are not sacred objects. So beat the crap out of them. And then my hot take number 4 is one that I've said on this channel many times before, which is that ebooks are infinitely superior to printed books in every way. They are more durable in the sense that they are not physical. So if you put a copy of one on a thumb drive and then a copy of the same book on a second thumb drive, and you have them on 2 different devices, you're never going to lose that book. You're going to need electronic devices in order to read it, but you're going to have electronic devices until you don't have anything. Okay? It's not like the world is tomorrow going to magically step back to the 12th century and you'll be around and floundering, and then what will you do? Because, oh my God, I didn't prepare for going back to the 12th century, so now I don't have any books. I can't use all these ebooks that I carefully saved on a thumb drive. Do you have any idea how many minutes it would take for you to die in the 12th century? You're going to have a lot bigger worries than that. It's not like, I'm set for any century, but what about my books? No, you're not set for any century. You're a product of electricity. Okay, so we're not talking about, I always used to say that to customers of mine who would ask, they were all cautious about getting an e-reader. And they would say, well, what if the electricity goes out for a day. And I'd say, well, the thing will last longer than a day. You'll be fine. And they would say, well, what if the electricity goes out for a week? I'd say, well, that hasn't ever happened in your lifetime, but if it did, you'd still be okay. You can charge it up, and all the books will still be there when the electricity comes back on. And they would say, well, what if the electricity never comes back? I'd say, okay, well, if I don't think you're making the rest of your purchases on the basis of whether or not the apocalypse is going to happen. So ebooks are better in that way, in that they're more durable. They are far more responsive to a reader, far more responsive in every way. They will tell you the definitions of words and phrases. They will give you context. They will provide you with your own light. They will give you infinite space in order to take your own notes. They can talk to you. You can toggle an option on most of them, and they will simply start reading the book to you. And so on and so forth. They do everything that a print and paper book does not. The only thing they don't do is that they need a power source occasionally. But a print and paper book needs a light source. Always. It's not just occasionally. It's not like if you soak a print and paper book in bright daylight for all of the day, it will glow with its own reflected light for all of the night when you need it. No, no, you need a light source. So that's my hot take number 4, is that ebooks are simply better than print and paper books. And hot take number 5, I'm not going to name any names here. I'm not going to say explicitly that I'm responding to anything I may have seen recently on BookTube, because it doesn't need to. It doesn't need to be recently. I've seen this many times. So I want to stress it as my hot take number 5, something that should not be a hot take at all, which is you cannot review a book if you have not read the book. Let's repeat that for the use in the back. You cannot review a book if you have not read the book. A review is a critical assessment of a work of art. You cannot critically assess a work of art if you have not experienced the work of art. I know that right now I have angered most of Book Talk and most of Goodreads, but nevertheless, you can react to the part of a book that you have read. There is such a thing as a DNF reaction. There is no such thing as a DNF review. You cannot review a book unless you've read it. If a doctor came to your consultation and said, well, I've read your chart, except for the last 4 pages. So now I'm going to prescribe you medicine and surgery. You would say, no, if you didn't read the whole of my chart, you didn't read my chart. And also I want another doctor. So I have heard it said in various quarters of BookTube and book social media that you don't need to read a book in order to review it. You can perhaps get a summary that you pay for, or you could review the book based on your reaction to the first 2 chapters or the first 10 chapters. No. You can react to that, but you can't review it. I'm kind of speaking from my own profession here, but I thought I would end my hot takes with something that shouldn't be a hot take at all. If you haven't read a book, you can't review it. You can do a couple of things to it, but you can't review it. You can't call it a review. There's no such thing as a DNF review, because you don't know literally what you're talking about. So anyway, there you go. Those are some 5 bookish hot takes in a compliment to Christopher Russell. Of course, if you have bookish hot takes that neither one of us has covered, feel free to sound off on your own. But anyway, I thought this was interesting enough to do. I'll leave a link to Christopher's video, and I'll be back. Thank you, BookTube.